I returned to my lakefront property in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho after 3 months traveling through Europe to find a massive wooden dock jutting out from my private shoreline like someone had decided my beach was community property. The structure was pristine, freshly stained, and absolutely not mine. My name is Patrick Novak, and I had purchased this 2-acre waterfront lot 5 years ago specifically because it offered privacy and direct lake access without the headaches of neighborhood politics. The property sat at the end of Whispering Pines Road, bordered by thick stands of Douglas fir and ponderosa pine on 3 sides, with 200 feet of shoreline on the 4th. I had built a modest cabin here, nothing fancy, just a place where I could escape the noise of Boise where I ran my software consulting business. The whole point of this retreat was solitude. I stood on my back deck with my duffel bag still slung over my shoulder, staring at the dock in disbelief. It was not a small structure either. The thing extended at least 40 feet into the water, with a T-shaped platform at the end that could accommodate multiple boats. Professional-grade construction, complete with cleats and bumpers. Probably cost 20 grand to build. My first thought was that I had somehow walked onto the wrong property, but no, there was my cabin, my fire pit, my kayak rack exactly where I had left it. Someone had built this monstrosity while I was gone. I dropped my bag and walked down to the shore, my boots crunching on the rocky beach. Up close, the dock was even more impressive and more infuriating. The pilings were driven deep into the lake bed. The decking was composite material that would last decades. This was not some temporary structure. Whoever built it meant for it to stay. A laminated sign hung from one of the posts near the shore. Whispering Pines, a community dock, unauthorized use prohibited. That was when my blood pressure spiked. I had specifically purchased this property because it was not part of any HOA. I had checked the title, read every covenant, restriction, and easement. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that mentioned a homeowners association. My deed was free and clear. I pulled out my phone and called my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, who had handled the purchase. It went to voicemail. I left a message that probably sounded more panicked than professional. Then I called the Kootenai County Sheriff's non-emergency line. The dispatcher sounded bored. What is the nature of your complaint? Someone built a dock on my private property without permission. It is trespassing and vandalism. Is anyone currently on your property? No, but there is a massive structure that was not here 3 months ago. Sir, this sounds like a civil matter. You might want to contact an attorney. This is criminal trespassing. They came onto my land and built something without authorization. She sighed. I will make a note and have a deputy call you back. Can I get your name and callback number? I provided the information, hung up, and resisted the urge to throw my phone into the lake. Civil matter. As if someone could just waltz onto your property and erect whatever they wanted and it was your job to politely ask them to leave. I spent the next hour unpacking and trying to calm down, but every time I looked out my back window, there was that dock mocking me. Finally, I could not take it anymore. I grabbed my truck keys and drove into town to find some answers. Whispering Pines was not exactly a subdivision. It was a loose collection of properties along the eastern shore of the lake, connected by a winding gravel road. Some lots had cabins like mine, others were still vacant land. I had maybe 6 neighbors within a half-mile radius and I barely knew any of them. That was how I liked it. I drove to the property management office in town, a small storefront sandwiched between a hardware store and a coffee shop. The sign read Lakeview Property Services HOA Management. I had never noticed it before, probably because I had never needed to. A woman in her 50s sat behind the front desk, her hair styled in that aggressive blonde bob that seemed to be the uniform of middle management everywhere. Her name tag read Brenda. Can I help you? She asked without looking up from her computer. I am looking for information about Whispering Pines HOA. Are you a resident? I own property on Whispering Pines Road. Patrick Novak. She typed something into her computer, frowned, then typed some more. I do not see you in our system. That is because I am not part of any HOA. But someone built a dock on my property and put up a sign claiming it belongs to Whispering Pines HOA. Brenda's expression shifted from disinterest to something resembling concern. You should speak with our president, Diane Mitchell. She handles all the property issues. Where can I find her? She is actually next door getting coffee. Red jacket, dark hair. You cannot miss her. I thanked her and walked next door to the coffee shop, which was doing decent afternoon business. Sure enough, a woman in a red North Face jacket stood at the counter, ordering something complicated that involved oat milk and extra shots. She was probably late 40s, with hair cut in a severe shoulder-length style and an air of authority that made her seem taller than she actually was. I waited until she had her drink, then approached. Diane Mitchell? She turned, sized me up with practiced efficiency. Yes, Patrick Novak. I own property on Whispering Pines Road. Someone built a dock on my shoreline without permission and it has a sign saying it belongs to your HOA. Her expression did not change, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or calculation. Mr. Novak, yes, I am aware of your property. We have been trying to reach you for months. I was traveling, and that does not explain why there is a structure on my land. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. She gestured to a corner table, and against my better judgment, I followed her. We sat and she took a careful sip of her coffee before speaking. Mr. Novak, there has been a misunderstanding about your property status. When you purchased your lot 5 years ago, the HOA covenants had not yet been formally recorded, but they were in the process of being established. Your property falls within the Whispering Pines community boundaries. No, it does not. I had the title checked by an attorney. There are no HOA restrictions on my deed. The restrictions were added after your purchase, as part of a community improvement initiative. All property owners were notified. I was never notified of anything. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through some emails. We sent multiple notices to the address on file. They were not returned as undeliverable. What address? She showed me the screen. It was my Boise address, my business office, which I only checked sporadically since most communication came through email or my cell. Physical mail went to a P.O. box that my assistant handled. That does not make it legal, I said. You cannot just impose HOA restrictions on existing properties without consent. Actually, under Idaho law, if a majority of property owners in a defined area vote to establish an HOA, all properties within that area are bound by the decision. We followed all proper procedures. I felt my jaw clench. Even if that were true, which I am not conceding, that does not give you the right to build on my property without permission. The dock is a community amenity approved by the board. The placement was chosen because your lot has the best water depth and access. We felt it would benefit everyone, including you.
I do not want a community dock. I want my private shoreline back.
Diane's expression hardened slightly. The dock stays. It has been paid for through HOA assessments, and removing it would be prohibitively expensive. If you have concerns, you are welcome to attend our monthly board meetings and voice them through proper channels. Proper channels? You built something on my land. On community land, Mr. Novak. I understand you are upset, but this is how community living works. We all make small sacrifices for the greater good. I stood up, my coffee untouched. You have not heard the last of this. I would expect nothing less, she said coolly. By the way, you also owe 3 years of back HOA dues. That is $8,400 plus late fees. You should be receiving a formal notice soon. I walked out before I said something I would regret. Back at the cabin, I tried calling the sheriff's office again. The same dispatcher answered, and when I gave my name, she said, "Yes, Mr. Novak. Deputy Harrison will return your call when he is available. It might be a few days. We have had several priority incidents." A few days meanwhile, there was an illegal structure on my property, and apparently I owed money to an organization I had never agreed to join. I called Marcus Chen again. This time he picked up. "Patrick, got your message. What is going on?" I explained the situation in detail while pacing my deck. Marcus listened without interrupting, which I appreciated about him. He only spoke when I had finished. "Okay, first things first. Send me photos of the dock, the signs, everything. Then forward me any mail or notices you have received from this HOA, if any. We need to establish whether they followed proper procedure for creating the association and adding your property." Diane Mitchell claimed they sent notices to my Boise office. "Did you receive them?" "No, but that address is not my primary residence. I have a P.O. box for business mail. That might work in our favor." Idaho law requires proper notice to property owners, and if they used an address that was not your residence or registered mailing address, we can argue you were not properly notified. What about the dock? Can we force them to remove it? If we can prove your property was illegally included in the HOA, yes. But that is a process. In the meantime, do not touch the dock, do not damage it, and document everything. We need to be completely above board on this. Marcus, they are demanding $8,000 in back dues. Ignore it for now. Do not pay anything. That would be admitting you are part of the HOA. Let me do some research and I will call you tomorrow. I hung up feeling marginally better but still furious. I spent the rest of the evening taking photos from every angle, making notes about when I had left, when I returned, and documenting the fact that I had never given permission for any construction. The next morning, I was up at dawn, drinking coffee on my deck and staring at the lake, when I heard voices. 2 couples were walking down the path that led from the main road to my shoreline. They were dressed in casual outdoor gear, carrying fishing rods and a cooler. I set down my coffee and walked down to meet them. "Can I help you?" One of the men, middle-aged with a receding hairline and expensive sunglasses, looked surprised to see me. "Oh hey, we are just heading to the community dock. You must be new around here." "I have owned this property for 5 years. And that is not a community dock. It is on my private land." The other man, younger and wearing a University of Idaho cap, frowned. "The HOA built this dock for residents. Are you saying we cannot use it?" "I am saying it was built without my permission on my property." Until this gets sorted out, yes, you cannot use it. The first man's friendly expression evaporated. Look, buddy, I paid into the fund for this dock, $500. We all did. You do not get to just claim it because you live nearby. I am not claiming it. I am saying it is literally on my deeded property. You are trespassing. The younger guy pulled out his phone. I am calling Diane, you do that. They huddled together, talking in low voices, while I stood there with my arms crossed. The women with them looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to be anywhere else. I did not blame them. This was not how anyone wanted to start their morning. 5 minutes later, a white Lexus SUV pulled up on the road, and Diane Mitchell got out, now wearing a navy fleece with WPHOA President embroidered on the chest. She walked down with the confidence of someone who had dealt with difficult property owners before. Mr. Novak, I heard you are preventing residents from accessing the community dock. I am preventing trespassers from using an illegal structure on my land. We discussed this yesterday. The dock is a community amenity. You cannot block access. Watch me. One of the women, a thin blonde who had been silent until now, spoke up. This is ridiculous. We just want to fish. It is not worth all this drama. Diane held up a hand. No, Martha, you have every right to use the facilities you paid for. Mr. Novak is being unreasonable. She turned back to me. If you continue to interfere with HOA property and resident access, we will have no choice but to pursue legal action. Go ahead. I have already contacted my attorney. You built this without permission, without an easement, without anything. And when the sheriff finally returns my call, I am filing a formal trespassing complaint. The sheriff is not going to do anything, Diane said with the kind of certainty that made me want to prove her wrong. This is a civil dispute and you are going to lose. Save yourself the legal fees and accept reality. You are part of this community whether you like it or not. The two couples, sensing this was not going to be resolved quickly, muttered apologies and walked back to their cars. Diane watched them go, then turned to me with an expression that was pure ice. You are making enemies, Mr. Novak. This is a small community. Do you really want to be that neighbor? I want to be left alone. That was the whole point of buying here. Then you should have chosen property that was not part of a planned community development. It was not part of one when I bought it. Things change. Adapt or suffer the consequences. She walked back to her SUV, leaving me standing on my beach, my peaceful morning thoroughly ruined. Over the next 3 days I had 5 more encounters with neighbors trying to use the dock. Each time I politely but firmly told them they were trespassing. Some argued, some left angry. One older man told me I was being selfish and ruining the neighborhood spirit. I started keeping a log of each incident with times and descriptions on Marcus's advice. Meanwhile, Marcus had been doing his research, and when he called on the 4th day, he sounded cautiously optimistic. Patrick, I have been through the county records. The HOA filed their covenants 3 years ago, 2 years after you purchased your property. They listed your parcel as part of the community, but there is no record of you being properly served notice. Can we fight it? We can, but here is the complicated part. Idaho code does allow for the creation of HOAs in existing neighborhoods if a supermajority of property owners agree. The law is 67%. According to their filing, they had 72% approval. But I never approved anything. Correct. However, they are claiming that they sent notice to all property owners and that failure to object within the notice period constitutes acceptance. That is insane. It is how the law works, unfortunately. But we have an argument. If you can prove you never received notice, we can challenge your inclusion. The burden is on them to show they made a good faith effort to contact you at your correct address. So what do? I am drafting a formal objection letter and a demand to remove the structure. I will send it certified mail to both Diane Mitchell and the HOA's registered agent. In the meantime, has the sheriff called you back? No, it has been 5 days. Stay on them. A police report, even if it is just for documentation purposes, will help our case. After hanging up with Marcus, I called the sheriff's office for the 3rd time. This time, a different person answered, a man who sounded younger than the board dispatcher. Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, Deputy Harrison speaking. Finally, my name is Patrick Novak. I have been trying to reach someone for almost a week about a trespassing issue. Yes, sir. I have your messages here. I apologize for the delay. Can you describe the situation? I went through the whole story again, trying to keep my frustration in check. Deputy Harrison asked good questions, took detailed notes, and actually seemed to care. Mr. Novak, this does sound like it could be criminal trespassing, depending on the specifics. I would like to come out and see the structure, take some photos, and get a statement from you. Are you available this afternoon? Absolutely. Any time that works for you. I can be there around 3. Can you text me your exact address? I gave him the information and hung up feeling like finally someone in authority was taking this seriously. Deputy Harrison arrived exactly at 3, driving a marked patrol vehicle. He was in his early 30s, tall and fit, with the kind of calm demeanor that suggested he had dealt with every variety of human nonsense and was not easily rattled. I met him in the driveway and walked him down to the shoreline. He spent several minutes examining the dock, taking photos, making notes on a small pad. "This is definitely a substantial structure," he said. "Professionally built. Had to cost a good amount. I am guessing 20,000, maybe more. And you are certain you did not give permission for this?" "Absolutely certain. I was out of the country for 3 months. When I left, there was no dock. I came back, and this was here. Do you have any documentation showing you own this shoreline?" "I have my deed, survey maps, everything. I can show you." We went inside and I pulled up the documents on my laptop. Deputy Harrison reviewed them carefully, comparing the legal description to a property map he pulled up on his phone. "Your property line definitely extends to the water," he said. "And this dock is clearly within your boundaries. The question is going to be whether the HOA has any legal easement or right to build here. They do not. My attorney checked. There is nothing on the title. Okay. Here is what I can do. I can file a report documenting the structure and your complaint. That gives you an official record. However, I have to be honest with you, the prosecutor's office is probably going to view this as a civil matter unless we can prove intentional criminal trespasses. They built on my land without permission. How is that not criminal? Because they are claiming it is HOA property and that you are part of the HOA. Now you and I might know that is wrong, but from a criminal prosecution standpoint, there is enough dispute here that it falls into civil territory. You would need a judge to rule on the property rights first." I felt the familiar surge of frustration. So they can just do whatever they want, and I have to spend thousands in legal fees to stop them. Unfortunately, that is often how these things play out. But the report helps. And if anyone from the HOA continues to access your property after you have clearly told them not to, that could be criminal trespass on their part. You would need to document each incident and call us immediately. I have been documenting. I have had 5 groups of people try to use the dock since I got back. Good, keep doing that. And if it happens again, call us right away. If we catch someone in the act, we can issue a citation." Deputy Harrison finished his report, gave me a case number, and promised to follow up if anything developed. After he left, I sat on my deck and tried to figure out my next move. The following morning, I woke to the sound of power tools. I threw on clothes and went outside to find a work crew on my beach. 3 men with a truck full of equipment installing lighting fixtures on the dock. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted as I ran down. One of the workers, a guy in his 20s wearing a tool belt, looked confused. "Installing dock lights. We were hired by the HOA. This is my property. You are trespassing. Leave now." "Look, man, we are just doing our job. We were told this was HOA property. It is not. And if you do not leave immediately, I am calling the sheriff." The 3 workers exchanged glances. The older one, who seemed to be the crew leader, pulled out his phone. "Let me call our boss." "You do that. In the meantime, stop working." They stepped back from the dock while the crew leader made his call. I could hear him explaining the situation, his tone getting more frustrated. Finally he hung up. "Our boss says we need to finish the job. He has a contract with the HOA. I do not care what your boss says. You are on my property without permission. If you do not leave, I will call the police and have you charged with trespassing." The younger worker started packing up tools. "Man, this is not worth it. I do not want to deal with cops." The crew leader looked angry but nodded. "Fine. But you are going to hear from our company. We are billing you for the wasted trip, bill the HOA. They are the ones who lied to you." They loaded up and left, and I immediately called Deputy Harrison's direct number. He did not answer, so I left a message describing what had just happened. Then I called Marcus. They sent a work crew to install lights on the dock. I stopped them, but this is getting out of control. You did the right thing. Do not let anyone work on that structure. I sent the demand letter yesterday, so Diane Mitchell should receive it today or tomorrow. That will put them on formal notice. What if they ignore it? Then we file for an injunction and take this to court. But I am hoping that once they realize you are serious and have legal representation, they will back down. Most HOAs do not want expensive litigation. You do not know Diane Mitchell. I am starting to get the picture. Hang in there, Patrick. We have a solid case. That afternoon I was working on my laptop when I heard a vehicle pull up. I looked out to see Diane Mitchell's white Lexus in my driveway, along with a silver BMW sedan. 2 women got out with Diane. I met them at the door before they could knock. "Mr. Novak," Diane said, her tone formal. "This is Gretchen Vaughn, our HOA vice president, and Margaret Palmer, our treasurer. We would like to discuss a resolution." Gretchen Vaughn was around Diane's age with carefully styled auburn hair and expensive-looking glasses. Margaret was older, maybe 60, dressed like she had just come from a country club. "I have nothing to discuss unless you are agreeing to remove the dock." "We are not removing the dock," Diane said, "but we are prepared to offer you a compromise. If you agree to accept HOA membership and pay your dues, we will waive all late fees and penalties." That saves you approximately $3,000. I am not paying anything. The dock is illegal and needs to go. Gretchen stepped forward, her expression sympathetic in a way that felt calculated. Mr. Novak, I understand you feel blindsided, but we are trying to build something special here. A real community. The dock is just the beginning. We have plans for a community center, walking trails, a boat launch. These improvements will increase all our property values, yours included. I do not want those things. I bought here specifically because it was not a planned community. Margaret spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the authority of old money. Young man, you cannot stop progress. Whispering Pines is becoming one of the most desirable areas on the lake. In 5 years, your property will be worth double what you paid. You should be thanking us. Get off my property. Diane's expression hardened. We tried to be reasonable. You are making a mistake, Mr. Novak. The HOA has significant resources and excellent legal counsel. If you force us into litigation, we will win, and you will be liable for our legal fees on top of your own. We are talking tens of thousands of dollars. I will take my chances. Now leave, before I call the sheriff for trespassing. You already called the sheriff, Diane said coldly, and what did he do? Nothing, because this is not a criminal matter, it is a property dispute. And in property disputes, the HOA has every advantage. We have standing, we have documentation, and we have a board-approved improvement that benefits the entire community, not my community. Denial does not change reality. You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, we move forward with legal action, and we will also begin assessing daily fines for your obstruction of community amenities. $500 per day. You cannot fine me. I am not part of your HOA. The courts will decide that. Goodbye, Mr. Novak. They left, and I stood in my doorway shaking with anger. $500 a day. That was $15,000 a month. Even if I won eventually, I could not afford to rack up that kind of debt while waiting for a court date. I called Marcus immediately and told him about the threat. They cannot legally assess fines until there is a court ruling establishing you are part of the HOA, he said. But that does not mean they would not try. If they send you bills, do not pay them, but keep them all. Any overreach on their part helps our case. Marcus, I cannot afford a long legal battle if they are going to bleed me with fake fines, which is exactly what they are counting on. They want you to feel pressured into giving up. Do not let them win by intimidation. We will file for an emergency injunction this week, arguing that the dock needs to be removed pending resolution of the property dispute. That should at least freeze things until we get a hearing. After I hung up, I poured myself a whiskey even though it was only 4 in the afternoon. I sat on my deck watching the sun move across the water and wondered how my peaceful retreat had turned into a war zone. The next day, I received a thick envelope via certified mail. Inside was a formal notice from the Whispering Pines HOA, detailing my membership obligations, the back dues I allegedly owed, and a schedule of fines for obstruction of community property. They had also included a copy of the HOA covenants, which ran to 47 pages of dense legalese. I photographed everything and sent it to Marcus, then spent an hour reading through the covenants. They were draconian. Restrictions on exterior paint colors, landscaping requirements, rules about noise, vehicles, even what kind of outdoor furniture was permitted. There was a section on architectural review that required board approval for any external modifications to structures. And buried in the enforcement section was the clause about fines, $500 per day for major violations, which included interference with HOA operations or amenities. If I actually were part of this HOA, I would have violated about a dozen rules already. My cabin was dark green, not one of the approved earth tones. I had a small shed that had never been through architectural review. My kayak rack was homemade and probably not aesthetically up to their standards. I called Marcus. Did you see the covenants they sent? Reading them now. This is some serious overreach. Half of these restrictions probably would not hold up in court, but that is not our immediate concern. I am more worried about this fine schedule. I am going to expedite the injunction filing. How long until we get a hearing? In Idaho, emergency injunctions usually get heard within 2 weeks. I will push for sooner, but courts move at their own pace. 2 weeks. They could rack up $7,000 in fake fines by then. Patrick, they are not going to collect. This is a pressure tactic. Stay calm and let me handle it. Easy for him to say. It was not his property being taken over. That weekend, the situation escalated. I was in town getting groceries when I got a call from an unknown number. Mr. Novak, this is Gerald Sampson. I live 3 lots down from you. We have not met, but I wanted to give you a heads up. There is a community meeting happening right now at the dock. Diane Mitchell is there with about 20 people. You might want to come down. What kind of meeting? Officially, it is about summer activities. But I heard your name mentioned several times. I thought you should know. I thanked him, abandoned my half-full shopping cart, and drove back to my property. Sure enough, there was a cluster of cars on the road and a group of people gathered on my dock. Diane stood at the center holding a clipboard, addressing the crowd like she was running a town hall. I parked and walked down. As I approached, the conversations died down. Everyone turned to look at me. "This is private property," I said loudly. "All of you are trespassing." Diane did not miss a beat. "Mr. Novak, so glad you could join us. We were just discussing summer social events. We are planning a 4th of July party here at the dock. Potluck-style fireworks should be wonderful. There will be no party on my property." A man I did not recognize, heavyset with a thick mustache, spoke up. "Why are you being so difficult? It is just a dock. Let people enjoy it, because it is my land. That is all the reason I need." A younger woman holding a toddler looked uncomfortable. "Maybe we should move this somewhere else." I did not know there was a dispute. "There is no dispute," Diane said firmly. "Mr. Novak is confused about property boundaries. The HOA owns this dock and the access rights to this shore. He is going to realize that eventually. I have already contacted the sheriff and my attorney. You are all trespassing. Leave now or I will call the police." An older man, distinguished-looking with silver hair, stepped forward. "I am Robert Chen, HOA legal counsel. Mr. Novak, you are incorrect about the property rights here. The HOA has documented easement access based on our community covenants. If you continue to interfere, you will face legal consequences. Show me the easement. Show me where I granted access. The covenants establish shared access for all community amenities. You became bound by them when the HOA was established. I never agreed to that. Your failure to object during the notice period constitutes agreement under Idaho law. I was never properly notified." Robert Chen smiled, the expression of a lawyer who thought he had already won. "I look forward to presenting that argument to a judge. In the meantime, this community will continue to use its amenities." I pulled out my phone and called 911. The dispatcher answered, and I explained that I had approximately 20 people trespassing on my private property who were refusing to leave. "Sir, is there a threat of violence? But they are on my land without permission, and I want them removed. I can send a deputy, but if there is no immediate danger, it may be a couple hours." "That is fine. I will wait." I hung up and looked at Diane. "Sheriff is on the way. You can explain to them why you think you have the right to be here." The crowd started to murmur. Several people looked nervous. The woman with the toddler said, "I am leaving. I do not need this drama." Others followed, and within 5 minutes the gathering had broken up. Only Diane, Robert Chen, and the heavyset man remained. "You are making powerful enemies," the man said. He had not introduced himself, but carried himself like someone used to getting his way. "I do not care. You should. I am Warren Mitchell, Diane's husband. I own Mitchell Development, one of the largest construction companies in the region. I have lawyers, resources, and connections you cannot imagine. If you think you can win this fight, you are delusional. I think you built a dock on land you do not own, and now you are trying to bully me into accepting it. That is not going to work." Warren stepped closer, and I could smell expensive cologne mixed with coffee. "I have sunk $23,000 into that dock. It is not going anywhere, and if you keep pushing this, I will make sure you regret it. I know people in the county planning department, the zoning board, the building inspector's office. One call from me and your life gets very complicated. Are you threatening me?" "I am explaining reality." "Patrick," a voice called from up the beach. It was Gerald Sampson, the neighbor who had called me. He was in his 60s, trim and fit, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of outdoor work. "Everything okay down here?" "Just finishing up," I said. Warren looked at Gerald, then back at me. "This conversation is not over." He turned and walked up to the road, Diane following. Robert Chen lingered for a moment. "Mr. Novak, litigation is expensive and stressful. Consider settling. The HOA is prepared to be generous. Tell them to remove the dock. That is the only settlement I will accept." He shook his head and left. Gerald walked down to stand next to me. "You have got some guts, I will give you that. Warren Mitchell is not someone you want as an enemy. He started this, not me. I know. For what it is worth, I think you are right. I was not happy when they built that dock either, but I did not have the energy to fight. My wife and I, we are retired, we just want peace. But I respect what you are doing." "Were you part of the vote to create the HOA?" He nodded reluctantly. "They made it sound so good. Community improvements, maintained common areas, organized social events. I did not think it would turn into this much control. Now they are talking about mandatory landscaping standards and architectural reviews. It is too much." "Did you vote to include my property?" "I do not remember specific properties being discussed. They showed us a map of the community boundaries and said everyone inside would be part of it. Your lot was inside the lines. Even though I did not get to vote?" Diane said they had tried to contact all property owners. I guess I believed her. A sheriff's vehicle arrived and Deputy Harrison got out. He walked down to where Gerald and I stood. "Mr. Novak, you called about trespassers. About 20 people were having a meeting on my dock. I asked them to leave. Most did, but a few made threats before leaving. What kind of threats? I told him about Warren Mitchell's comments. Deputy Harrison took notes but did not look optimistic. Saying he knows people in government offices is not an actionable threat, unfortunately. But I will include it in my report. Were there any actual trespassers here when I arrived? No, they all left when I said you were coming. Okay, I will add this to the ongoing case file. Have you spoken with the prosecutor's office yet? No, should I? It might help. Sometimes they can advise on whether they would pursue charges, but I have got to be honest. Most trespassing cases involving property disputes do not get prosecuted unless there is clear criminal intent. After Deputy Harrison left, I thanked Gerald for coming down, and he headed back to his property. I spent the rest of the day feeling like I was fighting a losing battle. Everyone kept telling me I was right, but no one seemed willing or able to actually help. Marcus called that evening. I filed the injunction this morning. We have a hearing scheduled for next Friday. That is 10 days away. Warren Mitchell threatened me today. I explained the encounter. Marcus listened, then said, "Be careful, Patrick. If he has the connections he claims, he could make things difficult through indirect means. Watch for any building code violations, zoning issues, anything that could be used as leverage. So I just wait and hope nothing else happens. Document everything, avoid confrontation, and let the legal process work." I know it is frustrating, but it is the right way to handle this. The next week was tense. I worked from the cabin, taking calls with clients and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but I could not focus. Every time I looked out the window and saw that dock, I felt my blood pressure rise. On Wednesday, 2 vehicles pulled up, one a county pickup truck, the other an unmarked sedan. A man in khaki pants and a polo shirt with a county ID badge came to my door. "Patrick Novak? I am Ted Bryant from the Cooten County Planning Department. We received a complaint about unpermitted structures on this property. I need to do an inspection." "What structures?" The complaint mentioned a shed and a deck addition. "May I look around?" I knew immediately this was Warren's doing, but I could not refuse a county inspector. "Fine, but I built that shed 5 years ago. If there was a permit issue, it would have come up then. Can you show me the building permits?" I did not think I needed one. "It is 100 square feet just for storage." Ted made a note. "Structures over 64 square feet require permits in this county. I will need to measure." We walked around my property while he took measurements, photos, and notes. The shed was actually 120 square feet, which I had known, but I thought the limit was higher. He also flagged my kayak rack as an unpermitted structure and noted that my deck, which I had expanded slightly 2 years ago, did not have an approved modification permit. "I am going to have to issue violation notices for all 3, Ted said. "You will have 30 days to either obtain retroactive permits or remove the structures. This is retaliation. Warren Mitchell arranged this inspection because I am fighting the HOA. I do not know anything about that, sir. I just respond to complaints and enforce code. You will receive formal notices in the mail." After he left, I called Marcus and explained what happened. "This is exactly what I was worried about. They are using government resources to harass you. Unfortunately, if the violations are legitimate, you will need to deal with them. But document the timing. It supports a claim of retaliatory conduct if this goes to trial." "How much is this going to cost me?" "Retroactive permits are not too expensive, maybe a few $100s per structure. But if they make you remove everything, you are looking at more significant costs." Friday came, and I drove up to the Kootenai County Courthouse for the injunction hearing. Marcus met me outside, carrying a leather briefcase stuffed with documents. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I want this to be over." "It is just the beginning, but hopefully we get a favorable ruling today." We went inside, through security, and up to the courtroom. Diane Mitchell was already there with Robert Chen and another attorney, a stern-looking woman in her 50s. Warren Mitchell sat in the gallery, arms crossed, radiating hostility. The judge, Honorable Margaret Steinberg, was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on her nose. She called the case, and both sides approached the bench. Marcus presented our argument clearly and concisely. I was not part of the HOA because I had never been properly notified. The dock was built without my permission on my deeded property. We were requesting an injunction to halt all HOA activity on my land and require removal of the dock pending a full trial on the property dispute. Robert Chen countered with the HOA's position. The covenants were properly filed and recorded. Notice was sent to all property owners at their addresses of record. Failure to object within 90 days constituted acceptance under Idaho law. The dock was a community improvement that benefited all residents and should remain. Judge Steinberg asked pointed questions of both sides, particularly focused on the notice issue. "Mr. Chen, what evidence do you have that Mr. Novak received notice?" "We sent certified mail to his business address, Your Honor. The tracking shows it was delivered. Mr. Novak was not required to check his business address for personal property matters. His deed listed a P.O. box as his mailing address. Did you send notice there? Robert Chen hesitated. We used the address on file with the county assessor's office, which was his business address. That is a problem, counsel. Idaho law requires reasonable efforts to notify property owners. A business address for a personal property matter may not meet that standard. I felt a surge of hope, the judge continued. However, Mr. Chen, regarding the structure itself, regardless of HOA membership, did the HOA obtain any permits for construction on waterfront property? Those typically require environmental review. We believed it was within our rights as the property owner, Your Honor. You believed? So no permits were obtained. Not yet. We were planning to file for retroactive permits. Judge Steinberg removed her glasses. Let me make sure I understand. Your HOA built a structure on disputed property without permits and is now claiming ownership based on covenants that may not have been properly noticed to the property owner. Is that accurate? We followed all procedures, Your Honor. I am less convinced. Here is my ruling. I am granting a preliminary injunction. The HOA will cease all activity on Mr. Novak's property, including use of the dock, pending a full hearing on the merits. The dock will remain in place for now, but no one is permitted to use it, Mr. Novak. You are not to damage or modify the structure. This dispute will be resolved at trial. I wanted to cheer but kept my expression neutral. Additionally, the judge continued, I am ordering the HOA to provide complete documentation of its formation, including all notices sent to property owners, proof of delivery, and the vote totals. Mr. Novak, you will provide evidence of your primary residence and mailing address as of the date the HOA was formed. We will reconvene for a status hearing in 60 days. Dismissed. We left the courtroom and Marcus looked pleased. That went well. The judge is skeptical of their claims, and the injunction keeps them off your property for now. What about the fines they threatened? They cannot legally assess them while the injunction is in place, and if they try, it would be contempt of court. Warren Mitchell caught up to us in the hallway. This is not over. You have no idea what you have started. Neither do you, I replied. Over the next few weeks, things were relatively quiet. The dock sat unused, a monument to poor decisions and overreach. I dealt with the county building code violations, obtaining retroactive permits for the shed and deck, and dismantling the kayak rack since it was easier than trying to get approval for it. Marcus and I prepared for the next hearing, gathering evidence and building our case. He also filed a counterclaim against the HOA for trespassing, seeking damages and removal of the dock. Then, 7 weeks after the injunction, I received a call from Deputy Harrison. Mr. Novak, I finally have an update for you on your trespassing complaint. I spoke with the prosecutor's office, and they have agreed to review the case for potential criminal charges against the HOA board members. Really, what changed? The fact that they built without permits and on disputed property during a legal challenge. That shows a level of intentional disregard that might meet the standard for criminal trespass. No guarantees, but it is more than we had before. What happens next? The prosecutor will review all the reports and evidence. If they decide to file charges, it would likely be misdemeanor trespass and possibly reckless endangerment if the structure was built without proper permits near a public waterway. That could mean fines or even jail time for the responsible parties. After we hung up, I felt a grim satisfaction. Maybe finally there would be real consequences. The status hearing came, and both sides presented their evidence. Marcus had done excellent work, showing that I had never received notice at my correct address, that I had maintained my primary residence in Boise, and that the P.O. box listed on my deed was my proper mailing address for property matters. The HOA tried to argue that using the county assessor's address was reasonable, but Judge Steinberg was not buying it. Counsel, if you are going to impose covenant restrictions on existing property owners, you have an obligation to make genuine efforts at notice. Using a business address when a mailing address was clearly listed on the deed is not sufficient. She ruled that my property had been improperly included in the HOA and that I was not bound by their covenants. Furthermore, she said, the construction of the dock was clearly trespassing. The HOA is ordered to remove the structure within 30 days at their expense. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges and daily fines. I wanted to hug Marcus right there in the courtroom, but the judge was not finished. I am also awarding Mr. Novak damages for trespass in the amount of $15,000 plus legal fees. The HOA will pay these costs within 60 days. Diane Mitchell looked like she had been slapped. Warren was red-faced, furious. Robert Chen started to object, but the judge shut him down. This is my ruling. If you wish to appeal, that is your right, but the injunction remains in place and the dock will be removed. We left the courthouse, and this time I did not hold back. I shook Marcus's hand vigorously. You did it. Thank you. You did it, Patrick. You stood your ground and did not give up. That is what made the difference. 2 weeks later, a different construction crew showed up at my property, this one hired by the HOA to dismantle the dock. It took 3 days and I watched every minute of it, making sure they did not damage my shoreline in the process. When the last piece was hauled away, I stood on my beach and felt something I had not felt in months. Peace. But the story was not quite over. A week after the dock removal, Deputy Harrison called again. "Mr. Novak, the prosecutor has filed charges. Diane Mitchell and Warren Mitchell are being charged with criminal trespass and unpermitted construction in a protected waterway. Both are misdemeanors, but they carry potential jail time. Will there be a trial? There will be an arraignment, and then it depends on whether they plead guilty or fight it. Given the civil case outcome, I would guess they will take a plea deal." I thanked him and hung up, feeling a sense of closure I had not expected. 3 months later, I received a letter from the prosecutor's office. Both Diane and Warren Mitchell had pleaded guilty to reduced charges. They received suspended jail sentences, substantial fines, and were placed on probation. As part of their sentence, they were also required to resign from the HOA board. The Whispering Pines HOA itself underwent a major restructuring. Gerald Sampson was elected the new president, and under his leadership, the organization scaled back its ambitions, focusing on basic maintenance and voluntary social events rather than aggressive control over property owners. I eventually got to know some of my neighbors, the ones who had not been part of the harassment. They were good people who had been misled by Diane and Warren's vision of a tightly controlled community. Most were relieved when the old board was ousted. My property remained HOA-free, exactly as I had intended when I bought it. I added a small private dock, properly permitted, and spent my weekends kayaking and enjoying the solitude I had fought so hard to preserve. Looking back, I realized the fight had been about more than just a dock. It was about the right to make decisions about your own property, to not be bullied by people who thought their vision was more important than your rights. It was expensive, stressful, and time-consuming, but it was worth it. Sometimes you have to stand up to the Karens of the world, even when it feels like you are fighting alone. Because property rights matter, and giving in to people who abuse power only encourages them to do it to someone else. My cabin remains my sanctuary, my escape from the chaos of daily life. The lake is still beautiful, the trees still tower overhead, and when I sit on my deck in the evening, watching the sun set over the water, I know I made the right choice. The legal battle taught me that persistence and documentation are your best weapons against overreach. Every photo I took, every call I logged, every piece of paper I saved, it all mattered. Marcus had been right from the beginning to tell me to document everything. I also learned that not all sheriffs return calls quickly, but when they finally do, having a patient, thorough deputy like Harrison can make all the difference. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they do turn if you are willing to stay the course. The $15,000 in damages I was awarded covered most of my legal fees, though not all. The emotional cost was harder to quantify. All those sleepless nights, the constant stress, the feeling of violation that came from having strangers claim ownership over my land. But there was also something empowering about refusing to back down, about proving that individuals can stand up to organizations with deeper pockets and more resources. Warren Mitchell's construction company took a hit to its reputation after the criminal charges became public. Several clients canceled contracts, not wanting to be associated with someone who had been convicted of trespassing and illegal construction. I did not take pleasure in his downfall, but I did not feel guilty about it either. He had brought it on himself. Diane Mitchell moved away 6 months after the trial. Rumor was she and Warren divorced, though I never confirmed it. I saw her once at a grocery store in town. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Our eyes met briefly and I saw something that might have been regret, or maybe just anger that she had lost. We did not speak. The HOA under Gerald's leadership became something reasonable, almost pleasant. They organized a 4th of July potluck at a community park, not on anyone's private property. They coordinated snow removal on the main road in winter. They created a neighborhood email list for sharing information about road conditions and lost pets. These were the kinds of things HOAs should do, helpful without being oppressive. Gerald stopped by one afternoon about a year after everything had settled. We sat on my deck drinking beer and watching boats go by. "You know," he said, "a lot of people thought you were crazy to fight like you did. They said you should have just accepted the dock and moved on." I heard that more than once. But you were right. We needed someone to stand up and say enough. If you had not fought, Diane and Warren would still be running things, making everyone's life miserable with their rules and their fines and their vision of what the community should be. So thank you. I was just protecting what was mine. It was more than that. You reminded everyone that we have rights, that we do not have to go along with things just because someone with a clipboard and a title says so. We clinked bottles, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the beer. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. I spent about half my time at the cabin, half in Boise. The quiet of the lake recharged me, let me think clearly and focus on work without distractions. I took up fishing, something I had never done before. It turned out I was terrible at it, but I did not care. It was peaceful. I also got involved in local property rights advocacy, joining a group that helped homeowners deal with HOA overreach. My experience became a cautionary tale, a teaching example of what could happen when HOAs were allowed to operate without oversight. I spoke at a county commission meeting about the need for better regulations around HOA formation and enforcement. Some changes were made. The county now required proof of certified mail delivery to property owners' registered addresses before HOA covenants could be imposed on existing properties. It was not a perfect solution, but it would prevent what happened to me from happening to someone else. I never built a large dock like the one the HOA had constructed. I kept my little platform just big enough for one kayak and a place to sit with my feet in the water. That was all I needed. The shoreline remained natural, rocky and wild, home to ducks and occasionally a heron that would stand motionless in the shallows, hunting for fish. My neighbors and I developed a friendly wave and chat relationship. Nothing intrusive, but nice. The couple 2 lots over invited me to a barbecue. The family with kids sometimes asked if they could use my beach to skip rocks, and I always said yes. That was community, the real kind, based on mutual respect and voluntary interaction, not forced participation and threatening letters. Marcus and I stayed in touch. He sent me a bottle of whiskey at Christmas with a note that said, "To standing your ground." I appreciated that he had believed in the case even when the outcome was uncertain, that he had not pushed me to settle just because it would have been easier. The criminal case against Diane and Warren set a precedent in Idaho. Prosecutors in other counties started taking HOA complaints more seriously, recognizing that sometimes these disputes crossed the line from civil to criminal. It did not solve the nationwide problem of HOA abuse, but it was a step in the right direction. I often wondered what would have happened if I had given in, if I had paid the dues and accepted the dock and just tried to get along. I would have saved myself a lot of stress and money in the short term. But I also would have lost something fundamental, the right to control my own property, to make my own choices, to live the way I wanted on land I owned. Some people are not cut out for community living, and that is okay. I am one of them. I like my neighbors, but I like them at a distance. I do not want community meetings and shared amenities and rules about what color I can paint my shutters. I want to sit on my deck in my underwear if I feel like it, play music too loud at midnight, let my grass grow wild, and not answer to anyone. That is why I bought where I did, and that is what I fought to keep. The final piece of closure came almost 2 years after the initial conflict. I received a formal letter from the reformed Whispering Pines HOA, signed by Gerald and the new board members. It was an apology, an acknowledgement that the previous board had acted improperly, and a commitment to never repeat those mistakes. They also included a check for $500, a voluntary payment to cover some of the expenses I had incurred that were not covered by the court award. I did not need the money, but I appreciated the gesture. It showed that the organization had genuinely changed, that they understood what had gone wrong and were trying to make amends. I framed the letter and hung it in my cabin, a reminder that fights like mine can be won, that standing up to bullies and bureaucrats and people who think they know better is not only possible but necessary. My property remains my sanctuary, unmarred by unwanted structures or intrusions. The lake laps at my shoreline, the trees sway in the wind, and I have the peace I fought so hard to preserve. Every time I look out at that water, I remember what it cost to keep it, and I know it was worth every penny, every sleepless night, every moment of stress and anger and fear, because in the end, this was not just about a dock. It was about freedom, autonomy, and the fundamental American principle that your property is yours, not the government's, not the HOA's, not your neighbor's. It is yours, and you have the right to defend it, and I did.